Hey, what's up guys, it's Modded Warfare here. Welcome back to another PS5 Jailbreak tutorial. So in this one, I'm going to be showing you guys how to fully set up the PS5 Jailbreak from start to finish, completely offline, a completely offline solution. This is primarily for people who want to prevent system updates from being downloaded onto the console, which if installed would patch the jailbreak. And the best way to avoid that is to be completely offline from the start. So that's what we're going to cover here in this video. There's also people obviously who are worried about getting console banned if they connect to the internet. That's not really an issue because we're on an older firmware and we can't connect to PSN anyway, so it's not really a problem. But if you want to be extra safe, then being completely offline from the start is the way to go. So we're going to do this by using an ESP8266 or an ESP32, 32S2 or 32S3. Those are the supported models right now. So these are basically little Wi-Fi development boards that can run their own isolated Wi-Fi network, as well as a web server to host the exploit. So it's a completely offline solution because you just connect to the chip's own Wi-Fi network, and that Wi-Fi network is not connected to the internet, and therefore you stay offline while still being able to access network features. So it's pretty much the best offline solution for PS5 jailbreaks right now. So you can either go with, like I say, the 8266 or the ESP32 or the 32S2 or S3. The 8266 is the cheapest, I believe, of the chips, and it does have a little less features, but it will work just fine. So normally they're about half this price. You can get them for about $3 or $4, and they're practically giving them away on AliExpress, although those are probably cloned versions, which are, you know, we don't really know what the quality's like on those. So you can go ahead and grab yourself one of those for just a few dollars. Okay, so first we need to get things set up on the PS5. So we're going to head into the settings, go to our network settings, go down to settings, make sure the connect to internet box is unchecked for now. Then we're going to go back and go to the system and go to system software and system updates and settings. And you want to make sure download update files automatically and install update files automatically are both unchecked. Make sure that is set. And then head to the console information, and you just want to make sure that your system software version is jailbreakable. So after the dash, you can see mine is 04.03. That means I'm on firmware 4.03. You can follow this if your firmware matches any of the firmwares you see in this list from 3.0 all the way up to 4.51. Then that means you have a jailbreakable firmware. So once you've confirmed all that, we can switch back over to the computer in order to set up our ESP chip. So switching over to the computer, first thing I'm going to do is right click on my start menu and go to the device manager. So what I'm going to do is plug in my ESP8266 chip into my computer with the USB cable, and then it should refresh in device manager. So we now have in ports COM and LPT, we have a USB serial device showing up here, and I can see that it's on COM port 8. So just make a note of the COM port of your ESP device. Now you may need a driver in order to use your ESP chip. So you can download the drivers from the link in the description. Normally it will be either a CP210X driver, which you can download from here, or it might be a CH340 driver. Some ESP chips use CH340, some use CP210X. So you can go ahead and download the CH340 driver here. So down here you've got the windows.exe. You just hit the install button and install the driver. So once you have that up and running, you should be good to go right here. Now there are some ESP chips like the ESP32S2s that need to be switched into a flash mode or program mode in order for them to be detected by your computer. So like for the ESP32S2s, you have to hold down the boot button and then press the reset button on the chip in order to switch it into program mode. But for most ESP chips, you should be able to program them just as is, just by plugging in the USB cable, and the drivers should be automatically detected or installed by Windows 11. So from here, what we want to do is get the Node MCU Flasher utility, which you can download from the link in the description on GitHub. Download that application and copy it somewhere on your computer. And you also want to download this PS5 ESP hosts 7-zip file here that I've created in order to kind of make it easier for you guys to get everything up and running for your ESP chip. So if we extract this first of all over to our desktop, what we want to do is open up Node MCU Flasher. You might need to run it as administrator. And then from here, we're going to click the reload button and then browse for our COM port. So if you remember, mine in device manager was on COM port 8. So I'm going to select COM 8. And then we want to select our Node MCU firmware. So you want to go to the PS5 ESP host folder from the download, and then go to the binaries folder, and then select the binary that matches your ESP chip. So in my case, I'm doing an ESP8266. So I'm going to select the bin file for ESP8266. So select the one for your chip, and then click open. And then we're going to leave the baud rate on 115200. It does say on your chip, probably on the back of your chip, it may say what the preferred write speed is. So you could set it to that. But if you don't know, I'm just going to leave it on 115200. Then we've got the flash mode, which I normally just leave on DIO. You want to say yes, wipe all data, and then flash node MCU. And this will write the binary file onto the chip, which will give us our Wi-Fi network on the chip, as well as the web server that's hosting the exploit. All of that will be flashed onto the chip right here. So there we go, leaving. Once it says it's leaving, then we should be good. You might get an error if you're on an ESP32S2 or S3, or maybe some other ESP chip, where it's unable to come out of its flash mode, in which case you just need to unplug it and plug it back in, and you should be good. Now you should do that anyway at this point. So once it's finished writing, we're going to unplug our ESP chip and plug it back in. And at this point, you can just plug it into the PS5. I would plug it probably into the back USB port so it's out of the way. And that way, whenever you turn the PS5 on, the Wi-Fi network should come on. Your PS5 can be set up to automatically connect to it. And that way, it's just a permanent setup. Every time you turn the PS5 on, the Wi-Fi network's there, hosting the exploit for you. So we can switch on over to our PS5 again and get things set up with the ESP chip now. So if we head over to settings, if we go down to network settings, connect to the internet, set up an internet connection, and select the ESP chip's Wi-Fi network, which will show up as a PS5 web access point. So select that option there, PS5 web AP. Then you've got the password, which should just be password. So PSSWORD. Again, this is an offline isolated network, so it doesn't have to have a secure password, but I will show you how to change the password very soon. So we're going to go ahead and click OK there and get connected up to this network. Connecting to access point. And then, of course, it will fail to connect to the internet because it doesn't have internet access, but we are connected. But because it's running its own local web server on the ESP chip, all we need to do is go over to the user guide page, and it should redirect us over to the web server that's running the exploit. So we'll say yes to the security certificate. And there we go. Bam, straight onto a jailbreak site where we can jailbreak our PS5. Now you can see there it's also downloading the offline cache. So we'll wait for that to complete. It can take quite a while. There seems to be something where on certain ESP chips it takes a really long time to cache. So you may have to wait several minutes in some cases. But basically what that's doing is caching the page. There we go, finished caching site. So it caches the whole site for offline use. Now you're already offline, but what that'll do is it means it will no longer require the ESP chip in order to access it. So you'll be able to access this even if the ESP chip is not working, or if the Wi-Fi network on the ESP chip goes down, you'll still be able to access this, and it should load things faster than it would normally loading it directly off the ESP chip itself. So now that we've cached the site, we should refresh by hitting the options button and clicking reload. See how quickly it loaded this time because it's running from the offline cache. So from here, we can hit the jailbreak button to try and jailbreak our PS5 and let it run the exploit, triggering UAF. Okay, so it failed to find victim socket, which is basically a crash, except it doesn't happen until you close the browser. So as soon as I close the browser, it's going to crash on me. So yeah, obviously when you load the jailbreak, it's not a perfectly stable jailbreak. It will crash from time to time when trying to load the jailbreak. But once the jailbreak does load, it should be stable. So we just have to reboot and keep trying until it eventually loads successfully. Read write established. And there we go. We have it up and running right here. So we've got all the different payloads that we can load. The main jailbreak payload for the PS5, of course, is the ETA hen payload. So we're going to run this. All right, there we go. As you can see, ETA hen is up and running. Loaded. Special thanks to Golden. Of course, this is by Lightning Mods. So that's now up and running. So if we press the PS button to exit, we now have the jailbreak running. Now, I'm not going to go into any detail in this video about how to use the jailbreak. I definitely recommend checking out my main jailbreak tutorial. which covers the online method, but it also gives you a good introduction to using the PS5 Jailbreak. So anyway, from here, if we go back into the settings, we now have access to the debug settings, and we can use this to install a kind of web browser package that will launch into the exploit on the ESP host, which can be quite a bit more convenient than having to load it from the user guide every single time. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So if we switch back over to our computer again, grab yourself a USB drive. So I've got one right here, USB-F. So I'm going to go into that USB drive. And then from here, if you go back into the PS5 ESP host folder, we've got the PKG-S folder. If we go into the packages folder here, you can see we've got a package for ESP host and ESP host media. If you copy those to the root of your USB, make sure the USB drive here is formatted in either exFAT or FAT32 format in order for it to be detected by the PS5. And then we're going to eject the drive and plug it into our PS5. Okay, so back on the PS5, we're going to go into the debug settings and go to game, click OK to that message and go to package installer. And we've got both of the package files showing up here, so we'll install both of them. So there we go, ESP host and ESP host media is now installed. So the difference is ESP host media just goes into the media section and ESP host goes into the game section. And that's so that these shortcuts can actually disappear. If you keep launching lots of different games, it will push this shortcut further and further back until eventually it goes into the games library, where it will not be able to be launched from the games library. So it's just handy to have one in the media section where you probably don't have that many apps, so that is unlikely to happen. So from here, you can just basically launch one of these shortcuts and it will take you straight to the exploit site, straight from the home menu, which is a little bit faster getting access to it, a little bit better accessing it from this rather than the user guide. So that is the basic offline setup done. And this gives you the advantage of also having network features, so that you can do things like access the file system over FTP, use PS5 debug, send payloads over the network. You can do all of those things that you wouldn't be able to do if you were just using the offline cache method without an ESP chip. So the ESP chip gives you all this functionality while still remaining completely offline. So that is the big advantage here. So if you were wanting to use any network features and connect to the PS5 from another device, in order to do that, let's say you want to FTP to the PS5 to access the file system remotely, then all you have to do on the device that you're wanting to connect to the PS5 from, in my case it's my computer, I can just connect to that same Wi-Fi network. As you can see here, I'm connected to the PS5 web access point. And then from there, all I need to do is open up an FTP client, put in the IP address of the PS5, which I think is 10.1.1.100, and then port number 1337, and then we can quick connect and click OK. And there we go, retrieving directory listing. It's a bit slow on an ESP8266, that's the only thing. But as you can see, I have access to the file system. Even though we're completely offline on our PS5, we can still use network features and connect to it from another device. So that is the big advantage of using an ESP chip instead of just relying on an offline cache, which has no network functionality once you go offline. So that is the big advantage right there. Now, if you want to configure the Wi-Fi network, then you can press L2 to switch to the browser. And from here, there's a pinned link, which will take you to the admin panel of the web server. So if we press X on that, you can see we can adjust the web panel here. You may need to select the config editor on the other ESP chips to access this page. But from here, you can change the SSID, so the Wi-Fi network, change the Wi-Fi network's name. You can also change the password from here as well, but I wouldn't really recommend messing with any of the other settings, but you can change the SSID and the password. And you also have access to the file manager, which can be used to update the payloads. Now, you'll need to do this on the computer by connecting to the network, so let me just go over that. So once we're connected, all we need to do is go to that same admin panel link here. So 10.1.1.1/admin.html. If we go to that link, that'll take us here. And then we can go to the file manager to update our payloads. You may want to update the payloads quite often, especially ETA Hen, which gets updated quite frequently at the moment. So if a new build of ETA Hen comes out, I think 1.4 is due to release really soon. It might be out by the time this video goes out. So if you want to update a payload like the ETA Hen payload, or add any additional payloads to the host, then this is what you need to do here. So if you go into the PS5 ESP host folder, we've got a files folder in here. If you go in there, you've got the host, which is the actual host that is running on the ESP chip, which contains all the payloads. And you have this update script here. So what you need to do is, let's say I've got a new payload. So I actually have ETA hen version 1.4, which is right here. So I've got this payload. So what I would do is I would delete ETA hen version 1.3 because there's not going to be enough space for both. And I'm going to put ETA hen version 1.4 in here. So I've updated the payload. And if I have any other payloads, I also have this Slayer's Govies decryption or dumper payload. I'll also throw that one in as well. So once you've added your payloads to the host, you then want to run the update payloads.bat file. So give that a run. And there we go. That'll update the host map, and it will also create a new app cache so that the payloads can be cached offline. Now, if you get an error while running that update payloads.bat, make sure you have Python installed from the Microsoft Store before running this. Otherwise, it will not create the cache. And then from there, you just want to upload this to the chip, which you can do from that web panel. So if we go back to the web panel here, all we need to do is go to the storage format and format storage, click OK. That will basically just delete all of the files on the ESP chip. So it'll just get rid of them all in one go. There we go. So if we go back to the file manager, it's now empty. So now we'll go to the file uploader. And then from here, we can select files. And if we go back onto PS5 ESP host, we just want to go into the host folder, select all of the files in here and click open, and that will add them all in. And then we just click upload files, and that will upload all of those back onto the chip. So we're now uploading our updated host with our updated payloads and new payloads that we've added. We're now adding that back onto the chip. Okay, there we go. We can see we've now got 3.00 to WebKit.js. That means all the files have been successfully uploaded. Because there's not much space on these chips and there's not much flash memory on them, then of course, if you add too many payloads, it's not going to fit onto the device. And then you'll notice that when you tried to upload all of the files, some of them didn't upload because there wasn't enough space to include them. So you're going to have to work around that space limitation. Okay, so back on the PS5, if we launch the ESP host again, and you can see it's now downloading a new cache because we've updated the payloads. So we'll give it time to update the cache. So we've got our updated ETA hen payload updated to version 1.4. And there we go. Site has been updated to a new version. It says please refresh. So we'll go ahead and reload. And there we go. Cache is now up to date. So we can run the jailbreak again. And there we go. So the way the payloads are added, it doesn't include the source or description anymore when you update it. But you can see we now have ETA hen version 1.4b showing up here. And the Slayer's dumping payload as well that I added is also on here, along with all of the other payloads that were available before. So let's run ETA hen version 1.4b. And there we go. You can see that is running 1.4b enabled. And we have done it. So it's as easy as that to update the payloads in the host. If you want to add a brand new host that's completely different, you can also do that. Upload a different web host to the device. That's totally possible. But yeah, with this solution, it's pretty straightforward. So that also works just fine. So now one final thing I should mention, if you're on an ESP32 based chip, so a 32 or a 32S2 or S3, you actually have another ability, which is the ability to compress the payloads, and that will allow you to fit more of them on the host, so you can fit more on that limited flash storage that the ESP chip has. So for example, what you can do, if you have 7-zip installed, you can basically just compress any payloads that are large, like the ETA hen payload. You can go to 7-zip and add that to archive, and make sure you select gzip as the compression format or the archive format, and you can put it on ultra compression, and then that will put it from 1.3 megabytes down to 443 kilobytes, and then delete the original payload. And an ESP32 chip, the host will actually decompress it and then launch it when you select the payload, which will take a bit longer to actually load the payload, but it will work. And that way you can do this with all of your payloads. You can also do this with all of the, all of the files in the host, every single one of them. you can actually compress into a gzip file to really squash the file size down, and then you can put more payloads on there. So if you want to get more payloads on your host, that is a way to do it. But it only works on the ESP32 based chips, and the offline cache will not work with compressed payloads. So anyway, that is basically it for this video. Thanks to Stugid for creating the source for the ESP chips, and to Wololo for actually updating the source for the ESP8266s to include the web panel, which is much appreciated. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next video.